Hello, I'm Scott Hammond from INSEAD Communications, and I'm here today with two senior research fellows from our Social Innovation Center, Benjamin Warr and Renato Orsato. You have just published a report that was presented at the European Business Summit a little while ago. The report deals with how Europe is facing challenges in terms of sustainable development. Could you just give us first in a nutshell what the report is about?
Well, the report looks to identify what are the major trends, global trends, and challenges and opportunities that Europe is facing over the next 20-25 years. Now, we've identified a series of trends that relate to energy use, climatic change, and the requirement for a transition towards a more sustainable economy. And we perceive this as providing the possibility for Europe to shift towards more sustainable patterns of production and consumption, at the same time gaining a competitive advantage in the global economy over the next 20-25 years.
Do you see things that are unique in the European economic environment that make it different from similar problems, similar issues in the US and Asia?
Yeah, I would say that the situation in Europe is quite different from that elsewhere in the world, for example in the US. In one major area, in the ability of Europe to be able to set itself ambitious goals with regards to carbon constraints, energy efficiency, renewable energy supplies, across the full 27 member countries. Now, in the US, no such equivalent type of motivation can be seen at the federal level. At individual state level, there's a lot of activity going on, but they haven't, the US hasn't been able to pull together the clear directive and set the targets that Europe has set itself earlier this year.
Obviously, we're talking about political considerations here, and what I find interesting in what you've just said is that you seem to be saying that 27 individualistic countries have actually been able to come together and form a more coherent and activist program to address these issues than a single federal government in the US. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I'd say it's a considerable reality in the sense that Europe has been able to identify and develop the political will to set targets for carbon constraints, 20% reduction by 2020 in CO2 emissions, 20% of energy supplies by renewable fuels, and a 20% improvement in energy efficiency. Now, some might say that these are not ambitious, that from a scientific perspective that we should ask for greater carbon constraints. But Europe has managed to do this, where the US has taken an alternative perspective.
In Europe, we have a very strong regulatory push in terms of a driver to promote eco-innovations or clean tech. In America, for its own culture, you have this much more relying on market pull. So this also reflects a little bit on the size of investments in venture capital. So although Europe is actually the leader in patents in clean tech, America leads the way in terms of venture capital investment. Along the at least 7-8 years now in the new millennium, we saw a steady growth of investments in clean tech venture capital. In 2005, they simply mushroomed. So you can see in the tangible effects of climate change in the Katrina hurricane, the crusade of Mr. Al Gore, and the indications that we have reasons, clear reasons to invest in clean technologies. So we had in America 4.5 billion in 2007 have been invested in clean tech. Is a bit higher than the EU. The European Union is about 1.5. Is still a small quantity when you compare with the total amount of venture capital, but it serves as a good indicator of the market believe that there are opportunities there to be tapped into.
The key issue for Europe is to understand that US venture capital exceeds in clean tech energy, exceeds European venture capital in clean tech energy by a factor of 3. It's 3 times larger. This is despite the fact that Europe leads with regards patents and technologies in clean energies such as wind, solar, combined heat and power and the like. Now what's the worrying thing for Europe there is that the US, as we all know, can move very fast and it can move very rapidly. Now the issue is, with 3 times as much investment money in the clean tech energy venture capital segment, will the US simply buy the patents, buy the technology, buy the brains and make the most of it, as it's done in the past with other technologies? Now the key question for Europe is to say, how can we maximise the amounts of money going to investments in clean energy technologies? And that involves the creation of a culture of investment in these types of funds. What happens in the US, and I think it happens pretty much everywhere, is you get a virtuous cycle. Somebody who invests in that domain makes a profit from that domain and then reinvests further. So it becomes like a virtuous cycle. And we have to generate a culture for that in Europe. We have to generate clusters of eco-innovation, regions and centres where people can network and platform, where people with technology ideas can meet financing partners and meet businesses who are able to take products from the demonstration or the innovation demonstration to deployment and to full commercial maturity.
There is a huge potential for innovations in there in which can lead to competitive advantages. If you look at a business as part of a system of production and consumption, you see that in a system there are huge space for increasing efficiencies. And these efficiencies obviously relate to lower environmental impacts. So either via regulation or via business initiative, the point is there is a huge market space to be fulfilled by business. And that is possibly the optimistic view of climate change, of environmental constraints that we are facing today.
I'll give the pessimistic side. Over the past 100 years, from 1900 to 2000, in general, the price or the cost of most raw materials that are sourced from the environment, including energy, have been going down systematically. At the same time, technology that takes these natural resources and transforms them into services and products in society by businesses have been getting more and more efficient. Now, unfortunately, that efficiency improvement shows signs of stagnating. That efficiency improvement has been the driver of growth over the past 100 years. Consistently declining costs, improved efficiency, allowing consumers and businesses to get more bang for their buck. So every unit of energy in, they're getting more useful work out. Now if that trend reverses, if the cost of raw materials starts to increase, if carbon constraints adds an additional cost onto businesses, this positive cycle of declining costs, increased economies of scale, increased consumption, which is the driver of economic growth at the macro scale, could reverse. And that would be catastrophic.
What is easy to imagine is how a company would benefit from reducing its costs by being more efficient. What's more difficult to imagine is why a company that itself will not suffer in terms of its share price or market share because the climate is getting warmer, if it costs them more to reduce their carbon emissions, why would they do it?
Well, obviously for some business, it will cost more. You know, depending where you are, what you do. This is something that actually we have to recognize, that in management we always have a situation that depends on the context, depends on the characteristics of the organization, in which you actually cannot find a solution that fits everyone. The problem is that when it comes to the environmental debate, we have a tendency to put everything in the same pot and say, well, does it cost for business or doesn't? Well, actually, this is the wrong question. The question is when actually it costs, or when it pays, you know, to be green. So obviously, in certain contexts, if you don't really change your systems of production, if you don't look for alternative technologies, that's going to cost more, and you're going to be out of business. But in reality, if you have a broader view of the system, and in which you question the way, not just the way that the industry operates, in the way that business competes, but look into the demand side and look at what is the real purpose of your products or your services, maybe you can increase the levels of efficiencies along the system in a factor of 4, 10, or even 20. Meaning that you can do the same thing with a much lower environmental impact. So who can do that? Well, innovative companies. This is not for everyone, but obviously there is a space in there, and this is not rocket science. It's just a question of analyzing the systems of production and consumption with an eye, you know, for better or more efficient use of these products or services.
Now, if we can see this global trend of carbon constraints is not going to go away, it's going to remain the major feature of this century. There'll be other issues: water, food, energy security, etc. But carbon constraints are going to define the principal trend shaping global business over the next 100 years. Now, if you're not working one step ahead and perceiving the competitive advantage that you can achieve through investments in eco-innovations, then you're working by an old business model and you'll be outcompeted.
Benjamin, Renato, thank you for taking the time to discuss these issues. Obviously, we're not going to exhaust them in a short interview like this, but for our audience who are interested in looking further into this, I'll just remind you that the report that Renato and Benjamin have just published is called Greening the Economy, New Energy for Business. I'm Scott Hammond from INSEAD Communications. Thanks for joining us.